What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball. And joining me to do just that is Justin Boone. Boone, what's going on, buddy?
Dude, I got probably the best sleep I have gotten in weeks last night, so I am feeling energized. I am ready to go. I'm going to be a lot to handle. I will apologize in advance for this one, man.
I'm so shook that you just said that because, number one, I got an atrocious night of sleep last night, and also I'm staring down, staying up. People will have already heard it by the time they're listening to the show the next day. If you're watching it live, it's coming up. I'm staring down, having to stay up till the 10 p.m. Eastern kickoff for tonight. So I took like a 20-minute nap in the middle of the day. I had a cold brew probably like 5 minutes ago. So I'm really happy for you, though. I'm really happy for you.
Hey, this is why we work together, man. I'll carry us today. Don't worry. I got tons of energy, way more than usual.
Okay, perfect, because I was planning on having an atrocious show today, so I'm glad that you're able to step it up here and carry this thing. But yes, we have a lot to get to on today's show because it is the post-Week 7 People's Panic Meter. We have a lot of really interesting and some new names to talk about in the show, which is how you can tell we're transitioning into a new chapter of the season here. Here's a reminder for how this goes for the new folks. In the People's Panic Meter, first segment, we go through your submissions to the email fantasymailbag@yahoosports.com. The Panic Meter, we do that there. Second segment, those are your social media submissions. We actually do mix them up a little bit here. And then third and fourth segment, we got the waiver wire picks, and Boone's got some interesting names on the waiver wire to get to. So tons to get into on today's show, and it is time to fire up the post-Week 7 People's Panic Meter.
Would you say it's time for everyone to panic? Yes, I would, Kent.
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening. No! Wait! Everybody stay calm. Stay calm. What's the procedure? Stay calm.
The Panic Meter is presented by Dentech, protecting your teeth from fantasy stress, one matchup at a time. There are 4 tiers in the People's Panic Meter. There's no panic, some panic, total panic, and the dreaded Coping Corner. And we have to do a little bit of Coping Corner recap here, Justin Boone, before we get into the submissions for this week. There are a handful of members in the Coping Corner right now: Calvin Ridley, Isaiah Pacheco, TJ Hawkinson, Chase Brown, Tony Pollard, and Travion Henderson. And I just want to note this on Travion Henderson. Remember, folks, once somebody goes into the Coping Corner, we don't discuss them anymore because you're not panicking about them. It's somewhere between Jover, and it's not going to happen right now. Okay, that's where we are at when somebody is in the Coping Corner. So we got a great email from Autumn C about Travion Henderson, but we're not talking about it. Autumn, shout out to you. I hope your fantasy teams are going okay, despite the fact that you have Travion Henderson, because once you're in the Coping Corner, we don't talk about it. And man, I think our decision to keep Travion Henderson was reaffirmed this past week when Terrell Jennings not only played more snaps than Travion Henderson, Justin Boone, he also got a little attaboy in the hallway after the game from Mike Vrabel. I don't know if you saw this, but said, "We found our 5-minute back, baby." So Mike Vrabel jacked up on Terrell Jennings, not so much Travion Henderson. So I don't know if you have a comment on that or if you want to address any of these other names, potentially take them out of the Coping Corner. The floor is yours.
There's no one that I think warrants being taken out just yet. There's a couple of guys that made cases to maybe be put back on consideration for getting out of here at some point soon. Like you look at how good that Bengals offense looked with Joe Flacco and Chase Brown going over 100 yards in that game. Some easier matchups coming up for them. We did talk about that when Burrow went down. We did talk about how the schedule was going to be so hard for the next stretch, but that later in the season it would get easier and that maybe, just maybe, we could get some value from Chase Brown then. So wouldn't shock me if down the road we might pull him back out, but right now he stays in there. I'm not worried about really any of the other guys here. I mean, Hawkinson, I feel bad for because that touchdown, it was a touchdown. Like he caught that ball. I don't know how they reversed that and don't think it's a touchdown, but regardless, we will forever, once or twice a year, there's always going to be those plays that we just don't understand what's a catch and what isn't a catch. And then Henderson, at this point, like we said last week, he's a 1 injury away guy. He's not coming for this starting job. Like with Jennings getting out there late in the game, them not even giving Henderson like the garbage time work. What now is the case for Henderson? That like they're hiding their secret weapon, that they're like putting him in bubble wrap, and at some point they're going to unleash him later in the season. Like, that's like the Patriots galaxy braining the whole thing. Like, no, it is not. It's over for Henderson unless we get a Ramondre injury, and then at that point we'll reassess. So no, nobody in my mind coming out of the coping corner right now.
Yeah, Isaiah Pacheco had himself like a decent game here, but even in the first half when it was it was kind of a complete blowout from the first whistle onward, but nevertheless, in the first half when they didn't start resting starters, it was still 8 touches for him, 5 for Brashard Smith, and 4 for Kareem Hunt. So I don't think that was enough to get him out of the coping corner either. I agree. The only guy that I'm kind of looking at right now is Chase Brown, that maybe in a couple of weeks we consider him. I do just want to say, shout out to me, Justin Boone, for saying, like, let's not put Travis Hunter in the coping corner, because we would have had a tough conversation coming out of this past week's game where he finally broke through. I know it was obviously when the game was basically over, but nevertheless, I feel a lot better. We'll talk about another Jaguars receiver again later on in the show. But at least for now,
there was an injury, which we'll talk about, that might have helped Hunter a little bit. But yeah, good job by you keeping him out of there for now.
For now, we'll see. Again, we'll talk about another Jaguars wide receiver a little bit later on in the show. But with that, let's get into your email submissions, starting with Doug W. Sends in this email. Hey, love the show. Whenever you can compliment the show, that's a good way. That's a good way to start it off. Is Genty trustable after the bye week? I don't see any matchups that look good considering how it went against the Chiefs. I have him in guillotine, and it feels like he's going to be riding the bench. Thanks. Boone, what is your kind of panic level on Ashton Genty right now?
I'm going total panic on this one. And it's not really because the Chiefs game, because like you said, when you were talking about Pacheco there, like that game was a blowout from the jump. I think my concern, though, is that a couple weeks ago, I was talking him up as a guy who's starting to get more work in the passing game, right? He had 11 targets over 2 weeks. And it was like, okay, if he's at least getting that kind of volume, then no matter what the matchup is, if they do fall behind, he'll be able to save himself. And yet since then, we're not seeing that at all, right? Just 1 target in week 7. If he's not going to get the receiving work with the way this offense has looked, with the injuries they've had on the offensive line, with the struggles that Geno Smith has had, with, I think, Jacoby Myers probably being a lock to get traded. If anybody's getting dealt, I feel maybe the strongest that Jacoby Myers is not going to be a Raider in a few weeks here. I think Genty, like, what is the silver lining? What is the path for him to really saving his fantasy value, other than just being this kind of risky RB2 that you need to find the end zone? And this is a team that's probably going to struggle way more often than not. So not a lot of positive game scripts. I'm with Doug here. I have, total panic. And I think Genty not that far off potentially from coping corner based on where he was drafted and the expectations for him before the season, and just how this Raiders offense has kind of gone. It's been almost the worst possible run out for him. Everything has fallen apart there, and it gives him almost no chance to succeed week in and week out.
Man, yeah, I'm with you that I'm really close to making an argument for the coping corner here. Like, my instinct is actually to say coping corner on this one, just because of what you said, the expectations. That's something we're going to kind of bring up throughout the course of this program here, like bringing back, not just from a positive standpoint, but also when we start to get some of these negative performances. Like, let's remember the expectations for this player coming into the year. But for Genty, the expectations were very, very high. I would argue at times they were a little bit too high considering the team environment. And even with saying that, the team environment has been way worse than I could have possibly imagined. Yeah. I love this tweet from Daniel Jeremiah. I just watched the all 22 sideline only of the Raiders offensive snaps versus Kansas City. It took me 4 minutes and 44 seconds. I noted Nate Tyson's tweet about this yesterday, that they only ran 30 offensive plays, which was a historically low amount. Yeah, obviously it was an outlier in terms of just how bad it was yesterday, but it's been bad all season long for the Raiders. And they go into the bye this week, which is nice. Then they come out, they get Jacksonville, Denver, Dallas, Cleveland, Chargers, Denver again, Eagles, Texans, Giants, and then Chiefs in week 18. So there's definitely maybe Dallas is maybe starting to turn things around defensively, but there's not a lot of like clear, glaring yes spots for Ashton Genty. And I don't know, man. I watched that offensive line yesterday, and it's the crazy part about this, Boone, is that I think guys like Jackson Powers Johnson and DJ Glaze were okay last year, young players that showed some promise. Not only was it clear from the beginning of the season, oh my God, those guys are worse than they were last year. I think they've gotten worse as the season has gone on. And I didn't think we'd be entertaining, like, is Pete Carroll going to be one and done as the Raiders coach? But there's part of me that thinks this is so bad that this could just all get blown up by the end of the year from a team building perspective.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility here. And I went back to look because it was mentioned, right? Doug did mention that this is a guillotine league. And that makes me think about our buddy Sigmund Bloom and like the sabotage drop, right? Like, is Genty the kind of player that you do let go in a guillotine league because someone's going to get excited about that name and go pick him up, and they're going to be the one that starts him and has to deal with it? I think in a guillotine league, that makes a lot of sense right now, especially with him going on bye. If there's a player out there that you can get that you really like, Doug, drop Genty for him. I wouldn't be scared to do that in a guillotine league where you can reload, where there's going to be options on the waiver wire, versus a regular redraft league where you're just not going to be able to find somebody in the waiver wire normally that's going to be able to give you anything close to Genty's production most weeks. So yeah, in guillotine, I would definitely consider dropping him, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I haven't played enough guillotine leagues to really say for sure. I'm in my first one this year, going very well, by the way. Shout out to me. That's 2 shout out to me's in the first 15 minutes of the show. I got to dial that back. That's my bad. That's the cold brew too close to the 5 p.m. Live show. So I apologize to the audience for that one. But I don't know. I don't know if I could do that, but I do hear your point from the strategy perspective, why that might make some sense. I would say one last note on Genty. Well, 2 last notes on Genty. 1, 9 routes in this game last week, 5 for Raheem Mostert, 2 more for Dylan Laube. So your point about the passing down involvement is really well taken. Like, where did you rank Genty this week? And do you think you will ever rank him that high again?
I'm pretty sure I had him ranked as an RB2. And yeah, I think he's fallen now down into that low end RB2, and he could kind of get into the high end RB3 range because he's basically going to turn into a grinder who needs a touchdown to come through. How many guys are there like that don't have receiving work? I'd almost rather in most matchups play a David Montgomery over him, right? Those kind of guys that are in that low end RB2, high end RB3 range. There's a bunch of them that could vault up over Genty in the coming weeks when we know it's going to be a bad matchup. And if we're not seeing any signs that he's involved in the receiving game, then it's going to be really tough to get him into your lineup, and it's going to be really tough to rank him inside even the top 20.
This sounds like Coping Corner to me, Boone. I'll let you be the final judge here because this is the first real big fish. Some of these names we've had in here, they're obviously names, but this is the first real big fish we've considered. I'll let you be the final judge on this one, but it sounds Coping Corner to me.
I'm going to hold off because the matchups will be easier than this Chiefs matchup was, and there will be games where they can stick around. So I'm going to hold off, even though we would get a pass because he has a bye week. So it's not like we'd have to revisit it next week. I'm going to hold off on Genty in the Coping Corner. I'm going to still keep him at Total Panic.
All right, fair enough. Let's go to the next one here, which we're actually going to move a social submission up here to continue the running back panic talk and continue the big fish discussion here. Longtooth Tyrant, what a username, sends in this gif of Saquon Barkley and just says, hey, this is the worst first pick that I could have made. And by the way, not shout out to me, my guillotine league, I do have Saquon Barkley, so I'm personally invested. It's my only Barkley team. It's so funny, that team that I drafted, and I drafted it with my sicko tier reception perception subscribers. It's none of the guys are I don't have them on any other teams, which is weird because it's kind of worked out, but it's guys I'm not really invested in, but I'm shoot, these players, except Michael Pittman. That's the only one of kind of my guys on the team. So just a weird note. It's a very bizarre team, but it's one I like a lot. So anyway, Saquon Barkley on this team. Saquon Barkley not having a great fantasy season so far, fewer than 3 yards per carry once again this past week. Ian Harditz notes that worst 2 running backs this season in yards per carry, minimum of 50 carries. Zach Charbonnet at 2.6. We're obviously taping this before Monday Night Football. And Saquon Barkley at 3.3. What's your level of panic seeing Saquon Barkley and fantasy football hero Zach Charbonnet in the same sentence?
Yeah, it's not great. It is total panic on this one. And it's like you said at the beginning, right? part of this is expectations, because the expectations for Barkley were so high. And maybe we didn't expect him to do what he did last year because that was a historic season, but you thought you were going to get 80% of what he did last year,
Sure.
not less than 50%. And that's where we are right now. Like, he's averaging per game less than half of the rushing yards that he had per game last year. He's not even on pace to get to 1,000 rushing yards this season. Like, that's how bad this is right now. And what do we really think is going to change? Like, that offensive line has been struggling. He's not getting, and I think this is the biggest thing in terms of what he did last year versus this year. He's not getting to the second level. He's not getting that opportunity to break big runs. You see the frustration even with him, right? He's out there. He's getting mad about it. I don't know what is going to change here to get him back to anything close to last season. Like, you think about last year and all the big runs he was having. Last year, 17 20-plus yard runs. This year, 17 last year. This year doesn't have a single one so far. I'm very worried about him. Now, I won't listen to Cope and Corner on Barkley yet, because if you look at what he did this season, I mean, he had at least 15 fantasy points in 4 of his first 5 games. So I know the last 2 weeks have been bad, but he still has had some production. It's just a matter of expectations, and he's not giving you those like week winning performances. He was giving you some decent performances in your lineup, though, but he's not the guy that he was last year by any means. And like you, I did end up with him on some teams, often not because I really expected to get him, but because he was falling in drafts. And it turns out the other managers in those leagues knew what was going on, and I didn't, because I thought I was getting this great value. Scott Fishbowl, he fell to me in like the middle of the round. I was so happy to get him there, and now it's not working out by any means. So it's total panic for me. I don't think we can go to Coping Corner just yet, but he's kind of headed in that direction.
Yeah, I don't think we can go to Coping Corner yet, because this is the Philadelphia Eagles and they can just turn it on, right? And the interior of that offensive line has not played well this year, but there's been injuries, right? That's the thing. Maybe if they get these guys back healthy, I got to look real quick when their bye week is, but if
while
they
you're
can
looking
get
that up, I will say too that I have him down in the RB2 range now for rest of season. And I don't remember which episode or which show I said it on, whether it was one of the Yahoo shows. I guessed it on a couple of shows last week, but I said last week, if you could trade Barkley on that name value and get back a top 15 running back, a top 15 receiver, I would absolutely be doing that. Now, a little tougher after this game that he just had, because that's 2 weeks in a row, but he still has the name value. If you have to package him with something else, you can probably still move him in a deal. I would be looking to do that, because like I said, I don't think things are going to change so much that you're going to get him back to a level where he's anywhere near what he was last year. But what were you looking up? We bought you some time here.
Yeah, week 9 bye. So week 9 bye, they got the Giants this next week, and then they come back from the bye. Green Bay, Detroit, Dallas, Chicago, Chargers, Raiders. Like, there's definitely some spots here where it can turn around for Barkley. Again, if that interior of the offensive line gets healthier, but there's definitely no question that his yards after contact is down. I think the Eagles as a whole actually rank 31st in yards after contact per running back run this season. So I just think I'm willing to put Genty in the Coping Corner. We didn't, but I was willing to put Genty in the Coping Corner because he plays for this terrible Raiders team. The Eagles, we should still, they have some equity in terms of a little bit of faith in the long run here.
Well, and teams have been stacking the box against them a little more this season for obvious reasons, right? Try to stop Barkley and Hurts and make Hurts beat you with his arm. And then you have a game like this week where Hurts showed he can beat you with his arm. So maybe that does help even things out a little bit and makes defenses respect them a little bit more through the air. But yeah, I don't see a lot of paths to Barkley getting back to anything like he, was doing last season. I think we just have to move on from that and reset expectations, where now he's more of an RB2, where you hope for some of those spiked RB1 weeks.
That's a really good point by you on the what the Eagles passing game showed this week, specifically not just in the results and the stats, but it was the way they did it. It was some under center play action stuff, which we never see from this team. And if they can marry their run and pass game together, that could be something where, again, they come out of that week 9 bye and the offensive line is a little healthier. The system feels a little bit more cohesive under a new offensive coordinator. I'm not willing to fully bail on the Barkley stuff yet, but it definitely, I would be, and I do have him on this one team. I am totally panicked about what I'm going to get, what I've gotten so far from Barkley. Let's leave it at that. All right. Next one comes in from Ethan, sends in panicking about the Miami Dolphins. Good idea, buddy. News from today is that they aren't going to be making any coaching changes, but independent of that, just looks like a sinking ship. Achane is managing to keep his head above water, but he's struggled with injuries in the past, and I don't know how much longer this whole thing is going to hold together. You can cross your fingers for a trade, but every year we wish cast players to better situations and watch the deadline come and go. In short, sell for almost anything you can get within reason, or hope that volume keeps things alive for the players we care about, a.k.a. Devon Achane and the eternally injured Jalen Waddle. My guess, Boone, is that neither of these guys, and look, I could be totally wrong on this, but my guess is neither of these guys get moved at the trade deadline, and they do stay with the Miami Dolphins, who are starting Tua again this year. Mike McDaniel's not going to get fired, so no changes expected at this time for Miami. What does that leave your level of panic at when we're looking at Achane and Waddle in fantasy?
I feel that this screams total panic, and yet I weirdly am going to just say some panic for both of these guys. And it's because the volume, right? We see both of them coming through. And I know this week for Waddle, it was a bad week. He left the game at one point with an injury, and then he came back. It was also that weird weather game. There was rain, there was wind. That really didn't help the passing attacks in that game for sure. But Achane, like Ethan said, he's still producing well, right? Double-digit fantasy points in every game. He's had some spiked weeks in there. I wouldn't beat Waddle up for one bad performance, because before that, the 2 games before that, with Tyreek Hill out, over 200 yards and a touchdown during those 2 games combined. So he's shown that he can get there. And as much as this offense is kind of careening off a cliff, these 2 guys have managed to continue to produce other than Waddle in this really weird weather game. And yeah, there's so many other factors. If Mike McDaniel got fired, wouldn't that be a terrible thing for these 2? Don't we think Mike McDaniel running that offense is at least giving it some hope? And if Mike McDaniel leaves, who is taking over that you feel confident in that they're going to get the same amount out of these guys? So yes, that gives me a little bit of pause. The Tua thing, if Tua were sat down, and I think if they had any sort of legitimate backup, like a Jacoby Brissett, I think he would be sat down, but it's Zach Wilson and Quinn Ewers, and neither of those guys are going to give you an upgrade. It's only going to be worse with them under center. So that gives me a little bit of pause. And yet I think this thing is going to continue the way it's been, where it's awful and it's terrible to watch and you feel bad for this team. But Achane and Waddle are going to be able to produce for fantasy. So you're not going to be happy about having them in your lineup, but they're going to get you the numbers. They're going to get you through. And that's why it's only some panic for me, Harmon. Am I crazy?
No, I think that last week was a kind of extreme scenario. Now, it's worth noting, you mentioned those backup quarterbacks. Apparently, Mike McDaniel said a lot of interesting things, including that, Tua is going to continue to start, and my expectation is we're not going to throw 10 picks. We'll see about that. But he also said that Quinn Ewers and Zach Wilson are going to compete for the backup quarterback job in practice this week, which what a sad sentence that is. Yeah. But when Quinn Ewers came into the game, he got Jalen Waddle smashed at the end of that game. So he is definitely, unfortunately, we got to watch for another injury situation for Jalen Waddle. But when he's out there, the volume's been really good. Darren Waller is also banged up coming out of this game as well. It's just things could not be worse for Miami. But I think if you are a fantasy bro, the thing that you're hoping for is, Mike McDaniel rides the seat. There's no way he can survive this and be credibly brought back. But I think that you are hoping he survives the season. He makes it through the year. These guys have their moments, and then they try to rebuild it with a new staff next year. And I think that's probably what happens here. But I'm with you. I'm only at some panic, not total panic. Obviously, last week's result was a concern, but I think it was a little bit more extreme than you probably would have hoped for.
Yeah, it might be on the high end of some panic. We might be pretty close to total panic there. And when I first looked at this one, my immediate thought was to just say total panic right away. And yet I think when you actually look at all the context to it, you have to just go some panic, because they are managing to still produce.
All right, this next one comes in from Devon C. Email titled, "I am an Odunze bro, down bad. Hey, Yahoo Fantasy crew, this question is for fellow Odunze truther Matt Harmon. Odunze started the season red hot, but has been ice cold since the Bears' Week 5 bye. Is this a cause for concern, or do you think these bad performances were merely situational? One more bad week in a row, and I might end up smoking some cigarettes." Okay, well, hey, Devin, don't be smoking any cigarettes, all right? This is a smoke-free pod. I mean, you live your life, you make your choices, but please don't let this hobby drive you to smoking cigs, all right? Let's just get that off the rip. That being said, Boone, what is your level of concern for Bears wide receiver Rome Odunze?
I mean, sir, this question was addressed to you. This question was to fellow Odunze truther Matt Harmon. I think you're the one that should be giving your level of panic here, not me.
I'm sorry. Are you not a host on this podcast? Are you not somebody that? Are you not? Listen,
I'm just trying to be true to this person who wrote in. Devin clearly wanted your take.
I'm ready to rock on the show. I got a great
All
night's
right.
sleep.
Fair enough.
Buy me some time
need that
here.
Quick break. You were ready to catch a breather there. All right, I'm going to say some panic, but almost like some panic, close to no panic. The targets have been down. Yeah, the playing time is still high. He's a full-time player in this offense. I think what might be happening is he might be getting a little more attention from defenses than he was at the start of the season when he came out and definitely looked like the number one guy and potentially like a fantasy wide receiver one. And then coming out of the bye, we're seeing him not produce in the same way. I mean, Caleb's part of the problem for sure. I don't think Caleb Williams is necessarily playing that great right now. We're still seeing him kind of have his ups and downs along the way as he gets comfortable in that Ben Johnson offense. But here's the thing, Harmon. Here's what's keeping me at just some panic, kind of on the verge of no panic. And that's help is on the way in the form of the Ravens defense, the Bengals defense, and the Giants defenses. Those are the next three matchups here. The Ravens and the Giants, they're top 5 in terms of fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. We know the Bengals are also a plus matchup. So I think Odunze is going to get right in those contests. I'm not that worried about him. Of course, we believe in the talent. I think this is just what often happens with any receiver, even the good ones. You have some down games, and when they happen next to each other, people start to panic a little bit and was something wrong, but that's just the nature of the receiver position. Not that I need to be telling you that, but there are going to be down games. We talked about at the beginning of the season, right? If a player comes out, even a star player, and has a couple bad games to start the season, people act like they're never going to have a good game again. But if you would split those bad games up for, week 2 and week 15, you wouldn't really think twice. So the fact that he's had a couple down games recently, I think that's why we're a little more worried. But do not do anything drastic. Do not freak out and trade Odunze. This guy is a good player. He's a good fantasy asset. And I'm some panic to almost no panic.
Yeah. See, I couldn't have said that any better than myself. I couldn't have said that any better myself. Devin didn't need me. Nobody needed me. You said that perfectly. And yeah, right now, Rome Odunze is wide receiver 12 in points per game because I believe Rashee Rice is number 1 after playing just one contest, which of course he is.
Amazing.
Just
so good.
There's obviously we're taping this before Monday Night Football as well, so some guys could bump him up. But yeah, so Rome Odunze is wide receiver 12 in points per game right now, 12.98, and that's way more than you thought when you were drafting him. Like, again, that's where I want to say, like, expectations here. I think that's another thing when guys come out and they have that bad game to start the season, we're like, oh my God, he's never going to have a good game again. And then I think on the inverse of that, when a guy comes out and we put the stats up from our handle earlier, the first few weeks of the season, he's just hitting every single week. It's, oh no, he's never going to have a bad game again. But like you said, this position, it goes up and down. Ben Johnson actually literally did that up and down motion when asked about the passing game after this week 7 win against the New Orleans Saints, where, it's been very up and down so far. And he said the run game's been awesome. The run game has literally been the best run game in the league these last 2 weeks since they've got off the bye, which you can tell that was what Johnson really focused in on the bye, was getting that run game going. They're first in yards per game. They're just first in a bunch of different metrics these last 2 weeks. So the passing game is still a bit of a work in progress. Also wanted to share this. JJ Zachariason sent me this today, that in weeks 1 to 2, Odunze had an 83% catchable target rate. Weeks 3 to 6, 45%, and 33% in this last game. I'm interested how that got, the 33% got charted, just because I watched that game and there are definitely plays left on the field 100%. And I think, there's a couple where, like, Rome gets his hands on it. There's interference by the defender. He maybe could have brought it in. So just, like, interesting in how that's actually charted. But there's some plays where Caleb gets flushed from the pocket because of the blitz, and then where Odunze's open downfield and he's the primary read, that play doesn't get made. So I'm with you. I think it's only some panic, because you should expect some volatility. Also, let's make sure to include that if that stupid touchdown didn't get called back the game against Washington for that illegal formation or whatever it was, we're definitely not having this conversation. So, yeah, to me, I think these slow games are going to happen, especially when you're running the ball really well. So I'm only barely at some panic here on Rome.
Yeah, and I agree, and I don't know if there's that much more to say about it other than the fact that we hope this offense only continues to get better, that Caleb gets more comfortable in it, and we always expected there were going to be ups and downs, and that as the season went along, this whole unit was going to improve. And hey, like you mentioned, that run game looked incredible this week. Harmon and Yahoo, not to spoil the waiver wire section a little later, but he is one of the top pickups this week for sure. So let's just hope that things continue in the right direction. Everybody continues to get a little more comfortable. Ben Johnson keeps scheming the heck out of it. And by the end of the season, the second half of the year, we get the best results possible as people are competing to try to make the fantasy playoffs and to try to win a fantasy title.
All right, let's stick on second-year receiver island here. Gabe A sends in, love the show. Again, whenever you can just say love the show, we're definitely keeping your email on the show. I had hoped that during Rice's 6-week suspension, Xavier Worthy would get a chance to cement himself as wide receiver 1 and keep up a good share of volume even once Rice got back. However, Travis Kelce smashing him in week 1 basically ended that dream. And now I have a wide receiver who I think has the most real life upside, but basically gets the same work as Juju and Hollywood. Panic time. What's the level of concern? I just mentioned Rashee Rice leads the position in points per game after 1 week and averaging 0.8 air yards per target. Classic Rashee Rice stuff. So that's where the Rashee Rice thing is. Where are we at with Xavier Worthy after 1 game with Rice?
I think it has to be total panic, and I don't even know that it's his fault. I don't think he's healthy. Like, I don't think he's 100% going back to that injury earlier in the season. I think maybe he even did the Chiefs a favor by getting back out there when he did. I still think there's a big time risk that he could get injured again, that he could miss time. And yeah, I mean, going back to this game this week for the Chiefs, this is not the one to judge their offense on, how they deployed guys, the usage. This is not the game to look at that because they had complete control. Anytime that you're kneeling with like 3 minutes left in the game, that's not a game that you're going to look at and kind of pull away stats from and really make a case off of. And yet, like, what we expected before the year was that, like the email says, that we were going to get Worthy kind of producing as a wide receiver 1 for the stretch until Rice came back. And then what was that going to do to his value? Push him down to wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 levels. It didn't happen because of that injury, and it's unfortunate. You didn't get that value that you were hoping for early in the season, but now that Rice is back, it's not going to happen. I totally agree with the email that you look at Worthy as somebody that's value. It's a lot closer to Hollywood Brown, which is insane. You never would have thought that before the year. But again, I go back to, I just don't think this guy is 100%. I don't think he looks like the player that we expected him to be, and really the player that he looked like last year at times. Tell me if I'm wrong about that, Harmon, because I'm talking to, the receiver guy. You're going to be able to talk to that more than I am. But to me, you look at this offense and you see that Rice is the man, and he came back and was immediately the guy. Didn't even play a ton of snaps and was still getting peppered with targets, was still making plays. They were treating him like he was Jerry Rice out there. I think fantasy managers can expect some huge days the rest of the season. It could only improve potentially from here once he gets back to playing, closer to full-time snaps. But that's bad news for Worthy, who is just now this like boomer bust wide receiver 3, where he'll have weeks where he's the guy and he finds the end zone like Hollywood Brown did this week, but you're not going to get consistent numbers from him at all. And I just don't think he has that ceiling anymore that you thought he was going to have for the first 6 weeks of the year when Rice was out, and it all just boils back down to that injury.
Yeah, I think you made a lot of really good points there, and I think you hit the nail on the head where he's going to be like a boom bust wide receiver 3. So if you were expecting more than that, I think this would be a total panic thing. For me, I would only argue some panic just because this is kind of what I expected from Worthy, where
fair.
And this goes back to receiver archetypes, right? Where, not to get too dorky about this here, but I mean, come on. What, you don't want to get wide receiver archetype dorky? What do you listen to this show for? I think when you look at these two guys, like in the archetype of player that Xavier Worthy is versus the archetype of player that Rashee Rice is. Rice is always going to be easier to get the football to. And look, we saw that in this game. I mean, I watched that game back, charted Rashee Rice in that game, and it's just laughable, like some of the stuff that they do with him where he's just got so much space underneath. By the way, he looks great. No worries about the injury at this point. And like we're showing the route chart here, which is an incomplete view of the player because it's only the targeted stuff here. But again, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's the route. It's not even, I joked with James Coe about this earlier. It's not even a route shrub anymore. Like it's not the route tree. It's not the route shrub. It's like a lawn that has not been mowed recently. Like the HOA is sending you a notice like, hey buddy, you need to cut your grass, pal, because this thing is way too long, but it's not quite a shrub. That's where Rashee Rice's route tree was in his first game back, which it's going to expand as he goes on, as he plays more, of course. But again, it's always going to be easier to get the football to Rashee Rice than it is for Xavier Worthy. And then that's not on, in addition to that, Boone, I think Rice is further along in his development of that archetype than Xavier Worthy is as that like deep threat perimeter archetype. So Worthy's working against 2 points there to be a high volume player. That's not to say that he won't have weeks. And I think he's actually looked, I would say he looked good in the first game back before he picked up that ankle injury, which I think might be bugging him a little bit.
Right.
So there's a lot working against Worthy to being a high volume player. Not that he won't have weeks, but I think expect him to be a consistent wide receiver 2 that you plug into your matchups and 70% of the time you just forget it. I think that's maybe not going to happen here for him.
So then from a fantasy standpoint, because I always want to give like actionable advice, right? I would be trying to trade him because I do think he's got a cool name. He's had big games before. People know him. You wouldn't be able, I don't think, to get very much if you just trade him straight up, but I would package him with another player and try to upgrade somewhere else on your roster. But I would be trying to move off him if you can before it becomes even more clear that Rashee Rice is the guy and that Worthy's just going to be this like really inconsistent boomer bust wide receiver 3.
And maybe you try to do that here after week 8 when they play Washington, because that's a secondary that's given it up to some of these players. So maybe he has that big week. You wait one more week, you start him this week, potentially try to chase a big one, and then maybe you cash it in before a week 9 game in Buffalo, a week 10 bye, a week 11 game against the Denver Broncos. So there's definitely some spots here where, like, Worthy's, again, he's going to have big weeks. But see, Boone, this is why we work well together. I can do all this, dorky receiver archetype stuff, and then you can come in here and say, like, yeah, here's the actionable takeaway. We asked the chat, who would you rather have rest of the season, Rashee Rice or Roma Dunze? Rashee Rice ran away with it here, 92%. And look, I'm the biggest Roma Dunze bro you're going to find, and I would agree that from a fantasy standpoint, I would rather have Rashee Rice the rest of the season. There's pretty little doubt to me on that one. Unless you got any arguments to that. I think
I was going to say, how many receivers would you actually take over Rashee Rice at this point? That would be interesting to me. Like, there's not that many, like maybe 5 or 6. Like, I haven't done my rest of season trade value charts yet for this week. I haven't done the update, but I feel like Rashee Rice is going to be top 7. Like, I don't think he's going to be much lower than that.
Yeah, just looking at like top receivers, points per game right now. Puka, tough to say because he's currently injured, but I still would rather have Puka, JSN, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase. Like, yeah, I'd rather have those guys. Then yeah, you get into, you definitely, that's what the territory you get into. Like, next is obviously Egbuka, Pickens, Addison is up there, Quentin Johnson, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, Roma Dunze, Justin Jefferson's like wide receiver 50. I think, yeah, that's the bucket of players that Rashee Rice would be in right now because he's just so good against zone coverage, and he's just open because he runs that little route tree, and if he ever expands his game at all, then he's really going to take off. And I still have some hope that he could do that here in the next few weeks, but that's something that bears watching here. All right, we've got one more to get to before we go to break here, and we'll be a little quicker on this one. Kyle D sends in an email titled Devontae's Inferno, which incredible title, well done. Not going to read all this just because it was a lot, and like I said, we got to get to break here, but long story short of it is just kind of Kyle gives his thoughts on Devontae Adams. Everything you could ask for out of your wide receiver 2, the dynamic duo of Puka Nacua and number 17 has been fun to watch this year. However, important to note that Adams only had 5 catches and produced a nice fantasy day because of the ridiculous end zone chemistry with Stafford, who's aging like fine wine in 2025. His question is generally, should fantasy managers be comfortable starting Adams as a wide receiver 2 with Puka once he's back healthy, with the Rams coming off the bye, or are you more inclined for the Cortland Sutton, Lad McConkey types of the world? What say you, Justin Boone?
I mean, first of all, shout out to Kyle, out of Vancouver, Canada. Love it. Love all the Canadian
shout
football
out to the
fans. It's awesome. Coming out of Canada myself, I love to see that. I don't have any panic on Davante Adams, and I want to say all the nice stuff about Kyle because I don't totally understand this question, right? Like, of course, 3 touchdowns on 5 catches is just insane efficiency. But when you look at his outlook, like he has been crushing it so far. Like, what more would you want out of Davante Adams? At least 50 yards and or a touchdown in every single game but one. He scored a touchdown in 4 of his 7 outings so far. I still see him as a low-end wide receiver 1 right now for fantasy, and we don't know when Puka's going to be back for sure. So I would take him over all those other names that were mentioned there by Kyle. I think he is still a great pick, even though he's not technically the number 1 receiver on his team. We have seen teammates both finish as top 12 fantasy receivers before. I think this duo is going to do it again as long as Stafford stays healthy. Yeah. Stafford is dealing it right now. And Davante Adams we know what he can do in terms of touchdowns. It's great to see him doing it. Sure, the yardage hasn't been up there over 100 yards every week, but who cares? You do not need that from him when he's producing this way. So no, I would not be moving on from Davante Adams or cashing in high for those other names. I would be riding this out. I think you are lucky that you have him on your team.
Yeah, I get it because he hasn't scored a touchdown in 3 games, and in 2 of those games he was below 8 half PPR points. So I understand that is the floor, and those games might happen here. But the Rams quite literally brought Davante Adams into town to score touchdowns. Like, this is the role that they wanted to have him, and they need answers in the red zone. I don't know if you saw the cool clip from Puka during that Ravens game where he was really hammering these guys like, we need to earn the right to dance, that whole thing. So they know they need to get better in the red zone. They brought this guy in here to score touchdowns in the red zone. So no, I'm not concerned at all. No panic from me for Davante Adams, and I would definitely rather have him than the Lad McConkeys or the Cortland Suttons of the world. He's going to continue to score a bunch of touchdowns with this Rams team. All right. We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we run through your social media submissions to the People's Panic Meter right after this. All right, we are back. Let's run through the social media submissions to the People's Panic Meter, starting with our daily huddle, something like that. Says, I waited for 6 weeks for a bagel from George Kittle. Someone needs to introduce him to Mac Jones. Well, Justin Boone, we actually have some audio here to listen to from George Kittle because he responded to all the people counting on him for fantasy points in this return. And he said Mac Jones is actually not the culprit. Here's what George Kittle had to say.
Personally, I thought with the game plan based on the walkthrough yesterday, I thought I was going to have 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. So sorry, fantasy coaches and anybody that bet on me. My bad. Blame Kyle Shanahan, not me.
All right, so we're blaming Kyle Shanahan, I guess, for George Kittle being a blocking god on Sunday Night Football, but not getting any receiving production. What is your level of panic on George Kittle after the 0-point performance?
It's no panic. I mean, this is George Kittle, right? Like, I'm not worried about him at all. When he was playing before the injury early in the season, he barely played in that game. He had 4 catches and a touchdown. He looked like himself. His first game back from injury, not only might he not have been totally 100%, maybe Kyle Shanahan knew that, and maybe that's why they weren't featuring him as much. Who knows? That's speculation. But I also want to point out, he went up against the Falcons. The Falcons have absolutely stifled tight ends this year. And I thought in terms of my rankings, and I will apologize like Kittle did, I thought George Kittle was just good enough that he would overcome the matchup because I thought it was George Kittle and he would be fine. I guess I should have been more cautious with him coming off the injury because Atlanta, they're allowing the fewest fantasy points to tight ends this year. They haven't allowed a tight end to go over 21 receiving yards against them this season. Like, they are shutting them down. Only 1 touchdown to tight ends this year as well. So it is a very, very tough matchup whenever a tight end's going against Atlanta, even for somebody as good as George Kittle. But better days will come. Not worried about him at all.
Well, that trend's going to continue because week 8 they get the Miami Dolphins. I'm always interested to track the tight end versus defense stats because I do feel like they're a little bit fickle in terms of like you get a corner that's really good, like a secondary is really good, taking away wide receivers. I think there could be some stickiness to that, but that one's going to continue next week because Darren Waller's banged up, and I don't think Julian Hill or whoever is going to be crushing it for the Miami Dolphins. But just last note on Kittle here, I'm 100% with you. No panic. You got the 0, eat the 0, move on to next week when he probably comes out on friggin' National Tight Ends Day or whatever it is next week, and he's going to go crazy next week. You can almost lock that in right now.
And before we move on, I will say, just remember what kind of player Kittle is. He is one of the few tight ends that can win you weeks, right? He can come out and have that 30-point performance any given week, which not many tight ends can do. So, yes, you take the bad games, but you're going to have those huge, huge spike weeks from him along the way.
Next one comes in from @GoThunder, tweets this. We had one good week, but I think Brian Thomas Jr. is officially a bust. Yes, we did not talk BTJ last week. It feels like for the first time all season, but guess what, Boone? He's back on the panic meter. What is your level of concern for Brian Thomas Jr.?
I only have some panic about him. I'm not that worried about this one because, I would argue we were getting there with him, right? He had 80 yards in week 5. He had 90 and a touchdown in week 6. That's the reason why we weren't talking about him last week, because it seemed like it was starting to come along. And then this one, 31 yards. He leaves early with an injury, though. And I made this case before, but even earlier in the season, he had 40 yards in a game, 55, 49. That was week 2 to week 4. If you throw a touchdown in one of those games there, I don't think people are nearly as worried. So there has been production along the way. It was ramping up. Then he gets hurt in this game. So we'll see what that injury entails. I think it's a shoulder issue that he's dealing with. Hopefully it doesn't cause him to miss any time here, but I'm weirdly not that worried about him. I think he's going to continue to come through, even though we have to factor in expectations that people were thinking he was potentially a first-round fantasy pick. He went in the second round in a lot of drafts. I don't know that he's that first-round pick, but I think he is going to still have a good season along the way here, Harmon.
It's funny. I was almost ready to come in here and argue for coping corner for Brian Thomas Jr. only because, listen, he's wide receiver 38 on the season, and I'm talking in terms of points per game. I'm talking, and I'll let you decide this. So if you don't want to have him in coping corner again, I'm not going to force you to do it. But the only reason I was ready to make the argument is because of what you said. What he was drafted to be, I just think at this point, there's no shot that's happening. I think there's a better chance that they come out of the week 9 bye. The week 8 bye and say, week 9 going forward. I think Travis Hunter, they said they were going to make him more of the first read, intentionally use him. And his route tree was really expanded last week. He was running more of the full route tree. He set a season high in route participation last week after doing it again the week before. He's a guy who has clearly been trending up. Now, I think Brian Thomas will be fine, but we're talking about this sounds dramatic, but fully rebuilding the player into being a good starting receiver, not what he was drafted to be in fantasy right now. Cause I think they're frustrated with him. I think he's been frustrated with this stuff so far. So I think in Dynasty, he's still a guy I'd want to be buying because next year I think it could be great. God, some of these memes we're showing right now are just outright disrespectful. I mean, Brian Thomas Jr. is not Kadarius Toney. Okay, come on. What are we talking about here? But I get the frustration level with Brian Thomas, and that's kind of why, again, hopefully he's healthier. Hopefully he doesn't have the yips coming out of the bye. But I just think the idea of him ever coming close to recouping the value that he was supposed to bring you in fantasy this year, that's pretty tough at this stage.
Yeah, I will just say again, before this game, 80 yards and 90 and a touchdown. He was producing those
True.
2 weeks before. And if he didn't get hurt in this game, maybe we would have seen him put up some numbers later in the content. Maybe he would have put up better numbers in that one, right? He left early. I think he only played around 60% of the snaps or so in this game. I would say that even in redraft, I'm willing to buy him. And if people feel this way about him, I'm almost glad to hear that. This might be the furthest apart you and I have been on any one player this season. But yeah, I would be willing to do that with the caveat that if you have a losing record, you haven't gotten a ton from him, the first month of the season, he wasn't producing big numbers. If you have a losing record, he's going on bye, then yes, you trade him away. You get some pieces that can help you get wins right now. But if you have a winning record, you need to you want to take a shot on a receiver that you might be able to get pretty cheap based on what we're hearing here. I would do it. I think Brian Thomas Jr. could still have a good year albeit not that, top 10 necessarily fantasy receiver the rest of the season, but a guy that could be a high-end wide receiver too. I still think that is in him for this year.
I'm open to it. I'm open to being wrong on this one, and maybe I'm overreacting a little bit. But
So,
I'm.
Let's meet in the middle.
Go ahead.
Total panic.
Okay.
We'll meet in the middle.
Yeah, so,
you say
well,
Colton corner. I say some panic. We'll meet in the middle with total panic.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm still total panic about BTJ. You can't get me down to some panic just because, again, it's become a real problem for the team. Normally, drops and stuff like that is total noise. Even contested catches. I mean, look at Chris Olave. I was saying last week, he's got all this usage. It's been great, but he is not winning contested catches. And then he comes out and has a couple of awesome tight coverage wins and is one of the best receivers on the slate this past game. That is still possible for Brian Thomas Jr., but we just got to see it at some point. Like it's got to convert there.
Yeah, a bye week might be a nice time to sort of take a break, calm down, come back out, get some things right, and fingers crossed that's what happens.
Sticking on Jaguars here, we got another one from Jordan. Awesome. Jordan seems like ETN is in trouble here. The amount of carries he's getting each game is dwindling. I don't really have too much panic. Maybe almost like no panic about Travis Etienne. I don't think that Bajal Tutin's coming for his job, although they are going into the bye week. Maybe he comes out a little more involved. Not too concerned about Travis Etienne. What about you?
The numbers have been down. They haven't been as efficient running the ball the last few weeks. So I would definitely have some panic, but I agree with you that I don't think Tutin's going to overtake him this season. It would require an injury for that to happen. So it's just some panic for now, but it is trending in the wrong direction. Like they have not been that productive on the ground like they were early in the season, and whether that's defenses adjusting or whether that's an issue with the offense, I'm not totally sure. This is a game that I'm going to have to go back and watch. I haven't gone over this one quite as much. I was more interested in the Brian Thomas Jr. aspect than I was the running game, because I think in the first version of the show notes that I saw for this one, the ETN one wasn't in there. But I'm not that concerned about ETN right now because I don't think volume-wise Tutin is a legit threat. But at the same time, I get why people would be panicking.
Yeah, the offensive line has been problematic the last couple of weeks here. So that's definitely something that for both the run and pass game. Like they got some good play out of those guys early. They haven't gotten it as much lately. So yeah, I would definitely just say maybe some panic, but not too much on ETN. Next one comes in from JJ, who sends this: whatever the Commanders call the running back room, what a mess. So let's specifically talk about Jacory Krosky-Merritt here. What's your level of panic on Bill right now?
I have some panic, and maybe I'm leaning too much on like the expectation factor, because I think when you get a guy in like the later rounds, can you be that panicked about him? Like he's already given you some usable fantasy weeks. He's trending towards being the lead back there if he isn't already, even though it is this weird group where they're using three backs when everyone's healthy. They are trying to groom him to be that lead guy. He's just not really doing himself any favors by fumbling the ball the last few weeks before this game. And maybe that factors into why they're kind of still using him in the way they are and not giving him more yet. It's a rookie. It's a rookie, and it's not a highly drafted rookie. It's a late round rookie. There are going to be ups and downs here. And so for me, it's just some panic on him. Though I would listen to an argument for total panic if somebody, perhaps yourself, wants to make that one.
I would make the argument for total panic because I'm not too concerned about Chris Rodriguez is still involved, whatever. Yeah, he had 15 opportunities, did Bill, in this game, to 5 for Jeremy McNichols, to 3 for Chris Rodriguez, whatever. You can live with that. Like you said, he's only a running back 2. He's not going to become some running back 1. But the problem here, and why I would say total panic, is because he's not going to be that involved in the passing game. He's strictly like an early down runner right now. And if Jaden Daniels misses multiple weeks, by the way, this is like Jaden Daniels' potential third stretch of missed time in his NFL career. Not ideal for Jaden Daniels, who's a slender quarterback, and that was a worry about him coming into the league. And this was an offense that bet on a bunch of older players. And guess what? All their older wide receivers are hurt right now. So I don't know. The next couple weeks could be dicey for Bill, especially because they go into Kansas City this week, Seattle the next week, Detroit the next week. If this is Marcus Mariota, sans Deebo Samuel, and Terry McLaurin, Commanders ain't going to be favored in any of those games, and that's not great script for Bill.
You know what? I will add another thing, and I will agree with you on the total panic, because I will add that it's not just the Jaden Daniels injury. I think one of the things that boosts him up is he's not a superstar. He's a guy that we thought was going to take advantage of what was going to be a good environment. And with Jaden Daniels banged up, with Deebo Samuel missing time, with Terry McLaurin not 100%, this is just not the same offense that we thought it was going to be. And I don't think they can now turn to JCM and be like, all right, man, it's all on you. You're going to lead us. You're going to take the volume. You're the star in this offense. I think he was going to benefit, almost like when we talked about Chase Brown. And when Joe Burrow went down, it changed the environment for Chase Brown. It's the same kind of thing for JCM right now, that he needs all those other guys out there taking defensive attention away, and it's not really happening. So I'll come along with you. Total panic. I'm in.
All right, last one we're going to do here from Lamont sends in Justin Fields. I am prepared to ride out the season with Sam Darnold if he gets benched. Yeah, Boone, I saw what you want to do here. I am on the same boat. I think we need to go ahead and put Justin Fields in the coping corner. He got benched in the middle of last week's game. I mean, that sounds like coping corner to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know that he's the starter on his own team anymore. Like, what more do we need to see? Well, we'll find out this week, right? Like, who's going to start in this game. But you have Aaron Glenn out there, not really, last I saw, not committing to anybody as his starter. Tell me if I missed something this afternoon. But Aaron Glenn, please save fantasy managers from themselves. Bench Fields this week. Then no one will put him in their lineup. No one will convince themselves that he's going against the Bengals and he can still have a good game. Don't. Just put him on the bench. Let Tyrod Taylor go out there. That gives the other guys in the offense a better chance to produce, like a Mason Taylor at tight end. I would rather see Tyrod Taylor under center for him. Like, that's what we need right now, some stability. Fields is just not giving it. So, yeah, definite coping corner.
Yeah, I hate to like harken back to a summer take of mine, but one of the things that drove me crazy all this summer was people like, well, Justin Fields, you can draft him because it's not like the Jets are going to bench him. Well, if you don't win a football game, eventually you get benched. Eventually, like, everybody.
It's not even that they're not winning, though. It's like he looks so terrible. Like, it's not even close. Like, yeah, it's not like he's giving you average numbers, like but they're losing. He looks like he shouldn't be out there, and hopefully I think the Jets will make that decision, whether it's this week or sometime soon, to go with someone else.
He has his moments in particular matchups, but when it gets tough, it gets really tough for Justin Fields. And like, that's where I agree with you that Tyrod Taylor he's 36 years old. He's not the answer here, but he can be a steadying presence for this Jets offense. Get Garrett Wilson the football when he's back there. Get Mason Taylor involved. I still think the offense is well designed and they have some promise along the offensive line. So yeah, this is a team that needs to win some football games so they don't go 0-17 and everybody gets fired. All right. So yeah, I think a change is coming for Justin Fields. And if you were counting on him as your every week fantasy starter, it's already not going well for you. And it's definitely not going well because he's in the coping corner along with Calvin Ridley, Isaiah Pacheco, TJ Hawkinson, Chase Brown, Tony Pollard, and Travion Henderson. I thought we were going to add some bigger fish here this week, Boone, but it looks like we were not able to come to a consensus.
It's coming. There will be some more on the way, I think, in the next week or two. But I think there were a couple guys there that were close that we're holding off on for now.
Yeah, I'm trying to be a little bolder this year, but you're keeping me grounded here, which is what happens when you're able to get that good night of sleep, apparently.
Apparently the sleep is what's making me a little calmer, a little nicer today.
Yeah, by the way, two childless guys complaining about sleep or talking about sleep. We're not doing ourselves any favors with the audience right now. There is definitely not a lot of people happy with us right now. So on that note, we are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got Justin Boone's waiver wire picks heading into week 8. We'll get into those right after this. All right, we're back. Let's get into the waiver wire here. Justin Boone, we will go position by position, starting with quarterbacks. Let's hear it. Who are we picking up this week?
All right. We got 4 guys we're going to talk about here. Jackson Dart is the first one going against the Eagles. Joe Flacco versus the Jets. Michael Penix Jr. versus the Dolphins. And then Aaron Rodgers against the Packers. And for Jackson Dart, I mean, I didn't want to talk about him here. I didn't want to have him leading the quarterback section in the waiver wire column again this week because he's been there maybe every week this season, but he's led it, and I've written about him for like 3 or 4 weeks straight here. he just keeps overcoming tough matchups. We were worried about him going against the Eagles. That didn't stop him. We were worried about him going against the Broncos. That didn't stop him. QB1 fantasy results. He is basically in that conversation now as a low-end QB1 the rest of the season. I would keep an eye on, he did suffer an ankle injury in this game. He stayed out there. Ankle injuries are that weird kind of thing that they can get worse a day or two later, right? So keep an eye on that. Make sure he's healthy, but if he is out there, he's somebody that you're actually going to bid a little more. He is not just a streamer. He's a guy that could be a starter on your team the rest of the season. Joe Flacco just taking advantage of that incredible skill position talent for the Bengals. He knows how to butter that bread there, right? Just keep throwing it to Jamar Chase. He's getting it done. You know, QB 14 finish on a short week in that first game with them. Top 10 result this week from Joe Flacco. He's thrown 5 touchdowns, no picks. The schedule is pretty friendly the rest of the way here. Might get to face a Jets defense this week without Sauce Gardner. And isn't this kind of reminiscent of that really impressive stretch that he had a couple years ago when he went to the Browns? He won the comeback player of the year, had 5 strong starts. He averaged 323 passing yards per game, nearly 3 touchdowns per contest. You don't think of Joe Flacco as a potential fantasy option, and yet with these weapons around him, with how fast he's getting the ball out there, he can do it in this offense. So I think we should be treating him as a potential top 15 fantasy guy the rest of the way. You'll look at the matchups. Obviously, if he's in a tougher one, you pull back, but that's where we're at right now. Joe Flacco is somebody that you can put in your lineup, even in single quarterback leagues. Michael Penix Jr. going up against the Dolphins. He's picked up an injury. He's day-to-day right now. So, of course, this is another one we're going to have to monitor health. But his biggest games this year, they've come against the Bucs in week 1 and the Commanders in week 4. And those were games where you can throw on those teams. You can put up points. Well, the Falcons are big favorites this week. They get to go against the Dolphins. He's got Darnell Mooney back now, who we're going to talk more about him shortly. The Falcons offense, they're starting to hit their stride. What better place to do that than in Miami against the Dolphins? So especially, the Dolphins, I think, are just kind of like circling the drain. I don't know what's the nicest way to say it, right? Like, they are a team that just seems like they're ready to give up. We could see a team like the Falcons go out and just put up a huge total here. So keep an eye out for Penix if you need a streamer. And then Aaron Rodgers, another revenge game for him, maybe, right? We saw it in week 1 going against the Jets. He talked about how much that meant to him. 4 touchdowns in that game, 4 touchdowns last week against the Bengals. The Steelers, they're getting some extra time here to prepare for Green Bay. I know, this isn't an offense that we feel that excited about, but Rodgers having these 2 big performances with these 4 touchdown games, it shows he has that ceiling. You add that revenge factor. I know it's narrative based, but still, we're throwing that into the mix as another data point. It's a tougher matchup against the Packers, of course, here, but they've given up multiple passing touchdowns to 4 of the last 5 quarterbacks that they've faced, including Joe Flacco and Jacoby Brissett. So the old guys can get it done here. I think those are the top names you're looking at if you're looking at quarterbacks this week. But Dart is the only one that we're looking at as a potential QB1 the rest of the way. The other guys are just streaming options.
Yeah, I like all these options as streaming options, by the way. Speaking of Michael Penix, I mentioned this on the Sunday night recap show last night, where it felt like there were some serious home road splits developing, indoor outdoor splits developing for Michael Penix. I saw Scott Barrett pointed this out today, that Michael Penix at home averages 18.3 fantasy points per game, 8.9 on the road, 275 passing yards at home, 192.8 on the road. Some of that's again, splits are always going to be a little bit noisy, small sample, whatever, but it definitely feels that way with the Falcons offense. They get this Dolphins defense at home in week 8. So if Penix is able to go out there, you certainly can chase that big week for him. No question. I just want to follow up on the Flacco thing with you. How real do you think what you saw on Thursday night is with Flacco? How much of that was, all right, he's able to run the offense and Jamar Chase is awesome, versus my personal, and I think there's some realness to it, but my personal opinion also is the Steelers defense stinks. They're old and slow. So what's the level of blame here for what happened with Flacco on Thursday night?
I don't know. Like I said, you look at the schedule coming up here, and we got the Jets, we got the Bears, we got a bye. Coming back from the bye, it's the Steelers again. These are all matchups that I think Flacco can take advantage of. And it's not just Chase, it's not just Higgins. they have some good options like a Noah Fant there, like not guys that are stars, but guys that in their roles as the third or fourth guy in the pecking order can definitely get it done. Chase Brown showing a little more in that last game too. So it's really the environment and Flacco being that veteran, knowing he has to get the ball out fast behind that line and being able to do it. And I just love like the way he talked after the game where it was just like, almost like, why are you talking to me? Like, go talk to Jamar Chase, man. That's all I'm doing is I'm throwing him the ball and letting him make plays. So he knows what's going on there and he's just riding that wave. And yeah, I don't think that he's somebody that's going to necessarily like win you your league. He's not going to have these huge performances every week, but he can be that steady streaming option for you where he's relying on the talent around him to put up good performances against a pretty soft schedule the rest of the way.
Yeah, obviously Flacco was terrible with the Browns this season, but the personnel difference between the Browns receiving, and I think there are some interesting players on the Browns offensive roster from a skill position perspective, but like Jerry Jeudy, your number one receiver versus Jamar Chase as your number one receiver, you might as well be living on different planets. So yeah, I think Flacco can just kind of make the assignment happen here. He knows the assignment, throw to the good players, and he is thrown to the good players at an extremely high rate. Let's go to the running back position. Who do we got here heading into week 8?
Yeah, always one of the most interesting positions to talk about when it comes to the waiver wire. No absolute stars, no guys emerging as the lead back in their backfield, unfortunately. It's also a good thing because normally when that happens, it means there was an injury. So guys are healthy, but the guys I want to highlight here, Kyle Monangai going against the Ravens, Tyler Algier versus the Dolphins, Tajay Spears at the Colts, and then Brashard Smith versus the Commanders. And for Kyle Monangai, he saw that small bump in playing time coming out of the bye. Like that was the one a couple weeks ago we were looking for, right? Coming out of the bye, was he going to get that post-bye week bump? Was he going to take over that backfield potential, or at least show that he could? And it was like just a small bump, and there wasn't really huge stats that went along with it. So that kind of threw some cold water on things. This week, though, totally different story. He steps up. It becomes like a 55-45 backfield split. I think it was actually like 52-46 or something like that. DeAndre Swift, he still maintained the lead back role. Don't get me wrong. And he was the most productive guy in the backfield too, right? 138 scrimmage yards. He had a score. He had 20 touches. But Monangai sets career highs here in yards with 94, touches with 15. He scores his first career touchdown. We always wondered if Ben Johnson was going to make this potentially a two-man backfield. And he always said really, really positive things about Monangai. Whenever they asked him, he said, like, this is a guy that we trust. This is a guy that we can rely on. And you just wondered, was that ever going to turn into more usage and more production? This game, it finally did. So if this continues, Monangai could be an intriguing fantasy RB3, a guy with some upside here. I really like him as a pickup this week, Harmon. I would spend a little bit to get him as somebody that you're going to be able to throw in your lineup as a flex option. Tyler Algier versus the Dolphins. We already said it when we were talking about Penix, but going up against this Dolphins defense, you want to get Falcons in your lineup this week. And even though Algier is the number 2 in that backfield, he is an overqualified backup, and he turns into a strong RB3 in really good matchups, and it doesn't get much better than this, right? The Dolphins, we could run through it quickly here. Quinshon Judkins, 84 and 3 touchdowns. Kamani Vidal, 138 and a touchdown. Rico Dowdle, 238 and a touchdown. Breece Hall, 111. James Cook, 118 and a touchdown. Ramondre Stevenson, 142. You just attack this defense all day long. So yes, Bijan Robinson is going to have a huge game. Tyler Algier, also a guy that can get into your lineup this week and a guy that should just be rostered everywhere. Tajay Spears, we've talked about him before. I won't spend too much time on it. Not a guy you're going to bid big on, but somebody that I think you should stash just in case Tony Pollard gets traded. Until then, Spears just a flex option. And then Brashard Smith, we got, a pretty good game from him this week. Again, we're going back to that Chiefs Raiders game where it was a huge blowout, so they were able to get some other guys involved. I don't think we can look at that usage and say that that's going to be indicative of every week, but it was positive to see him get opportunity and then to turn it into something, right? 81 yards, 5 receptions, 19 touches in total. You want rookies to do well with their chances when they get those opportunities, and Smith was decent here. So he is still just a stash, not somebody that I'm going to run out and throw into my lineup yet, but good to see him produce when he got that chance, and a guy that we want to throw on our benches to see if he's going to get more opportunities in closer games, not just blowouts like this one, but somebody that definitely is interesting and could emerge as something more for fantasy down the road.
Yeah, Tyler Algier is a guy that I just don't understand why he is sub 40% rostered. Like it needs to be higher. He did pick up like a little bit of an injury in this last week's game, but doesn't seem like it's any big deal. And yeah, I mean, he's definitely a guy that if you're desperate, and there's a lot of teams on bye this week. The Lions will be on bye, the Jags, the Rams, the Raiders, the Seahawks. Like there's some definite starting running back options that will not be out there. You can throw the Tyler Algier running back 2 at the Miami Dolphins defense this week. You could definitely do it. So he's just a guy that I think needs to be rostered because if anything, knock on wood, happened to Bijan Robinson, you want him on your bench, not out there on the waiver wire.
I will say, too, that I didn't mention the injury with him because he did return to that game. So hopefully it's not something that pops up again during the week or that we find out got worse after the game. But yeah, he returned to that contest. So hopefully he's okay there. And not that we need yet another data point here, but the Falcons are 8.5-point favorites. So that's exactly the kind of spot when you want to target Algier as a potential fantasy play. Going to be a lot of positive game script for him in that one.
And I'll just note that I really liked what you said about Kyle Monangai. I'm kicking myself because if I have players that I need to put on the IR spot, like this last week, I had, some Garrett Wilson teams, I had some Calvin Ridley teams, and I was just waiting until those guys were ruled out and just throw them on the IR and add random backup running backs. Monangai was a guy I looked at and just I ended up going in a different direction. And so I'm kicking myself because of that, because man, Boone, if you can get a backup or maybe like I don't know how much we'll see him as a change of pace option going forward, just because it's worth noting DeAndre Swift came into this week banged up. That might have been why Monangai got more work, but he is a rookie that they, like you said, have talked positively about. I think has shown some good things there. And when you can get a guy like that, whether he's a high-end backup or maybe, I know everybody hates Zach Charbonnet, but like a Zach Charbonnet type player that mixes in a little bit and gets some run in his own right, and it's a good rushing ecosystem, like Tyler Algier. Why can't he be Tyler Algier, where you can start him as a what the heck flex? Because this run game, I just want to read off the stats here. The last 2 weeks, the Bears rushing game, the last 2 weeks on running back runs only, 174.5 yards per game. First, 54.7% of their carries have gone for 5+ yards. First, 26% of their carries have gone for 10+ yards. First, 35.8% of their carries have gained a first down or a touchdown. Second, oh, boo-hoo. 3.57 yards before contact per running back rush. First. Like they've been an awesome run game since they got back from the bye. We'll see if that keeps up. 2 good matchups here. But yeah, if the Bears are going to run the ball like that, we want Monangai on our fantasy benches.
I will say in your defense, and I think we brought this up on the show at one point, he hadn't really done anything that exciting before this week, right? There was no real highlight plays. Like he's doing okay in pass protection. Like I said, the team seems like they trust him, but we hadn't seen him really breaking loose for anything big. And then this week, that's when he definitely came through. So yeah, you make a good point about the Swift injury, whether that factored into it a little bit, but regardless, we saw Monangai produce. He's got to get picked up in fantasy because, yeah, there's a chance that he keeps this up, or there's a chance even that he could take over Swift's job if Swift continues to get banged up and continues to have these big performances, not necessarily always the best efficiency. So we'll see how it goes. But regardless, go out, spend a little bit, get Monangai on your roster.
I don't think Ben Johnson would mind if it becomes a little bit of like a 1-2 punch here. I think Swift will still lead the way because they've leaned into the right stuff for him. But, having more of a power element to it, like an up the gut between the tackles, because that's what they've just stopped doing with Swift. They just want to get him on the perimeter consistently, and it is working. Last point, just before we throw to the break. Yeah, I appreciate you saying to let me off the hook here. I don't know if you feel the same way as a fantasy analyst, football analyst, whatever. I don't like when other people do the hindsight stuff on me. Like, oh, yeah, how the hell was I supposed to know that? But I can absolutely do it to myself, okay? Like, I will crush myself all day in hindsight. But, yeah, nobody else can do it. Just me. I'll beat myself up for it.
There's trades that I made like 10 years ago that still keep me up at night. So yeah, totally. You always think about the mistakes that you made and the bad moves that affected your dynasty teams for years after that. Yeah, that stuff never goes away.
Yeah, just thinking about all those picks I lit on fire on Jermaine Burton in rookie drafts. Yeah, that's gonna be a tough one to live with 10 years. 10 years from now, I'll definitely be thinking about that. All right, on that note, we are going to take a quick break here, our last break of the show. We come back, we run through wide receivers and tight ends to add on the waiver wire. We'll get into that right after this. All right, we are back. Let's run through wide receivers, tight ends that we're adding off the waiver wire. Boone, hit me with the wide receivers.
All right, first guy here, Darnell Mooney versus the Dolphins. We just keep talking about attacking the Dolphins. He's yet another one. Keyshawn Boutte versus the Browns. Jaden Higgins versus the 49ers. Interesting note on him in a second because he plays tonight. We are recording before the Monday night games. And then Trey Tucker, who is on bye, but there's some possibility we could see Jacoby Myers traded. What does that mean for Trey Tucker and some of the other guys in that Raiders wide receiver room? So starting with Darnell Mooney, he returns to the lineup here, immediately makes an impact this week, catches 3 of his 5 targets, 68 yards. It's easy to forget, but he already has a 1,000-yard season on his resume. Last year, he probably would have done it as well. He had 992 receiving yards, didn't play in week 18. So this is a player that can definitely be a fantasy starter for you. Not a league-winning type, unless we see Drake London get injured and Harmon. We should both knock on wood for that because we certainly don't want to see that happen. I don't even want to put that out in the universe. I shouldn't even said it, but
and yet you
look
did.
At Mooney as a guy who who can give you like wide receiver 3 flex kind of production and then just be an absolute superstar when that Drake London injury happens. Knock on wood again.
Shut up.
He's available in. I had to push it one step further just to drive it in. All right, and he's available in 71% of leagues, Mooney. Right? Like I think that's just because of the injuries this year. Now back, if he can stay healthy, this guy needs to be rostered in way more places, maybe in all leagues. For Keyshawn Boutte, the Patriots are just ascending around Drake May, and we're seeing a bunch of guys kind of come along for the ride with him. And over the last 3 weeks, Boutte, 3 for 43, 5 for 93 and 2 touchdowns, 2 for 55 and a touchdown. Those aren't like the most consistent stats, but it's decent production. There's inevitably going to be volatility with him, but he is a guy that you could put in your lineup as a wide receiver for flex option. And Jaden Higgins, so we come back here, putting it on the line. I always do this. I bring up players before they play that night in their game, and it has turned out awful. It's normally with tight ends, I will remind everyone, so hopefully Higgins is not at risk here. But when I've talked down a player, they've gone out and scored touchdowns in games. And when I talked up a guy in Brenton Strange, he went out and got injured and ended up on IR. So we don't want to see that happen to Higgins here. But Christian Kirk is out. This is going to be an opportunity for Higgins to come off the bye, maybe get that post-bye week rookie bump, and get a much bigger opportunity in this offense. We need the team to give it to him, though, because there's been opportunities already this season, and they've gone with Xavier Hutchinson or earlier in the season, Justin Watson when he was healthy. Could we see Braxton Berrios be that kind of player and come in tonight and cause problems? Regardless, Higgins is somebody that they took early enough. They want him involved. You would think as the season goes along, that opportunity would come. This is a perfect spot for it to happen. And I will put my money where my mouth is, Harmon, in one of the Yahoo office leagues that we're in. Kendre Miller was on my bench. We found out torn ACL. He's out for the year. I dropped him, and I went out and picked up Jaden Higgins today before the game tonight. So let's hope that he comes through and has a big one, and you can get him even before, if you're listening to this right now live, go pick him up before the game tonight. Do what I did. And then Trey Tucker, who I mentioned, right? On bye, not somebody you can pick up and put into your lineup. And again, not a great game against the Chiefs, but really no Raiders had good games against the Chiefs this week. Still, we have seen Tucker have some really good performances this season, right? So moving along, if Myers gets traded, could this turn into Tucker's wide receiver room with a little bit of the rookie Jack Besh maybe? Like these are guys that you can go, you can stash during their bye week. And when that notification comes down from Yahoo, right? When that Jacoby Myers trade happens, the value of these guys is going to go up immediately. And whether you keep them on your roster or whether you tried to trade them for something after that, package them with someone else, all those options are available to you. But we play this smart. We pick up guys who are going to increase in value. And I think these Raiders receivers will get a bit of a bump if that Jacoby Myers trade happens. So I think Trey Tucker is the best of the bunch fantasy-wise. He's the one that I would go and pick up. But in deeper leagues, Jack Besh could also be somebody that you look at.
I was going to say for my sick pups out there, I would definitely recommend in deeper leagues, add a Jack Besh to your roster who played 47% of his snaps in the slot this past week with Jacoby Myers not out there. I think he was drafted to eventually be Jacoby Myers' replacement, which is probably going to come sooner than they wanted it to here in the next few weeks. And Jalen Noel behind Jaden Higgins is more of the direct archetype replacement for Christian Kirk. So again, it would probably be a deeper format because Higgins has played a little bit more, not like a dramatic amount, but a little bit more than Noel so far. But he might end up being the slot receiver if it's just Christian Kirk out. And, Jaden Higgins is 6'4", 215. You might be kind of threading the line there, bigger wide receiver, tight end-ish. I'd like a Jaden Higgins power slot, so we'll see if your curse can apply in a weird way to the big wide receiver. But yeah, in terms of Darnell Mooney, Kayshon Boutte, Trey Tucker, I think those guys are all kind of in the same bucket of like fantasy asset, really. And for Boutte,
yeah,
I think you're going to, you mentioned the volatility. I completely agree with you. There's going to be volatility, but I think you're going to know the weeks where you can start him. Like these past 2 weeks were that you could see those kind of bigger games for him coming, especially this week against Tennessee after you saw it against New Orleans. And the schedule's hit or miss. Cleveland this next week, I don't know about that, but there are games against the Bengals, the Giants later on down the line where you're definitely playing a Kayshon Boutte. So I like those recommendations there. Have them on your roster. Use them in the bye weeks. Definitely very possible there. All right, let's get to tight ends, including a big, big name that I know people are wanting to shell out some fab for.
Yeah, the guy who was the main image on my waiver wire column today. It's not often a tight end, but this week it was. Oronde Gadsden on the Chargers. He's going up against the Vikings. We also got Mason Taylor, who we talked about earlier, at the Bengals, Theo Johnson at the Eagles, and then Colston Loveland at the Ravens. We're still holding out hope for Colston Loveland, but Gadsden is that big pickup. I mean, 7 catches, 68 yards in week 6, follows that up with 7 catches, 164 yards in a touchdown. Harmon, there aren't many tight ends that even have a chance to put up numbers like that. And the fact that he did it when QJ was back, Quentin Johnston returns this week. You have all those top receivers healthy, and still we see Gadsden go out and have a game like this. There's been a ton of quotes from the coaches that they really feel strongly about this guy. They think they have a star in their tight end room in him. And we've seen all the other tight ends they have there have fallen by the wayside in terms of their playing time, whether it's Will Dissly or Tyler Conklin. None of these guys are playing very much. This is Gadsden's tight end room. And whenever you see a rookie performing like this, you got to go out, you got to be aggressive and get them on your roster, because there is always a chance that they are that next star, especially at a position like tight end, right? Where you just don't have a ton of guys that can put up big, big performances like this. And I don't think it's going to continue necessarily, of course, that he's going to have 7 catches every single week, but he's shown us this kind of ceiling at that tight end position, that single position where after the first 4 or 5 tight ends, it gets a little bit dicey. Why not go spend up, get that rookie on your roster and see if he can get in there and stay in that top 10, top 12 the rest of the season? I think he's got a shot to certainly do it. Mason Taylor, somebody who I've talked up in the past. I know this Jets offense, it's been so bad, right? He had a big game a couple weeks ago, and then since then, this offense has not gotten anything going. That's been a problem for him. Tyrod Taylor gets out there. At least he gets some catches after that this week. So we'll see what happens with the quarterback decision with the Jets and who it's going to be, whether it's going to be Fields or Taylor. As we said earlier, we're kind of hoping that it's going to be Taylor. But still, Mason Taylor is going to be a guy that is going to get enough volume that you could look at him as a streamer. Theo Johnson, 4 touchdowns in his last 4 games. Clearly a player that Jackson Dart is leaning on. And then Colston Loveland, Cole Kmet. He hurt his back. Is he going to play? Could that be the thing that maybe unlocks Loveland? I certainly hope so, but I'm not putting him in my lineup. I'm just stashing him right now.
Yeah, we'll get your deep sleeper here because we got to wrap. But I got to read off this stat from Jacob K. Oronde Gadsden's 164 receiving yards are the 4th most ever by a rookie tight end in a game, trailing only Jackie Smith, Mike Ditka, and Mark Bavaro. He's the 3rd rookie tight end in the Super Bowl era with 150 plus yards and a touchdown in a game. Joined Pete Michael and Bob Tucker. These dudes played in like the 60s, 70s, and freaking 80s. So like, come on. I mean, Gadsden is doing some crazy stuff out there. So definitely go after him. But you have one more deep sleeper here, not any of the positions we've covered, so let's hear it.
No, we're just going to throw it a defense. There wasn't a good deep sleeper this week, so we're going to tie it all together in a bow and come back to that Falcons defense going up against the Dolphins. Only 9% rostered. Go and pick them up and take advantage.
I definitely am going to try to pick up some Falcons defense, start them against Tua. Mike McDaniel says we're not going to throw 10 picks, or his expectation is we're not going to throw 10 picks, but guess what? Sometimes expectation is not reality, so we'll see what happens. Boone, hell of a show, buddy. just so well rested. You know, we felt it all throughout the show, pal. So really appreciated it as always, man.
Good luck getting some sleep tonight after that 10 p.m. game.
I'll be all right. There's worse things that I could have a real job. So
True.
At least there's that. All right. That is going to do it for us today. On Tuesday, Ray Garvin joins me for another edition of the Data Dump as we share 10 stats you need to know heading into week 8. That's going to be live right here, 5 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. Until then, we are out.